welcome. My name is Vince Faney. I am the producer of the show Vinsanity Unplugged, In Search of Game Changers. Go out to the community. I look for people who are pushing the envelope, ahead of the curve, in all sorts of walks of life. Today, we have two people who are running for office, and from what I understand, they fit into that category. To my left, we have Stefan Streck.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, got that right.
You were running against DeFazio?
Yep.
Okay. And to my right is Mark Roberts. He's the featured guest, and you're running against Greg Walden, right?
I am.
Okay. So, you know, one thing I got to say before I go on, don't hate me for dressing up. All right? I got totally dressed up for the part here. But anyways, what I wanted to ask you is something you did or happened that went viral and national. Could you tell us about that? You had a lot of hoopla about what happened on some sort of tweet?
Yes, there was a tweet, and I've been very active on Twitter because I enjoy the platform, because you can be creative on it.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I responded to something in a very untoward way that was not worded appropriately, and it caused me some blowback.
Well, are you allowed to explain like how it was?
I don't really want to go into the specific wording. I think everybody's well aware of it. It's been removed. It was something towards one of the...
It was in reference to the First Lady.
Yes, unfortunately.
It went viral?
The word bag was involved, as well as some other words we won't involve. But it was, I think we can all agree, an inappropriate statement. You have since apologized to Mr. Trump in the White House. And
well, I have
Melania.
Privately, an apology letter was composed within a couple days and sent to the White House as well as Trump Tower.
Yeah, because there was some blowback from, we saw, this was what, CNN, Fox News, Yahoo?
It was unfortunately, Yahoo killed me, and then I was talking to my campaign manager, and I was like, please God, I don't want this to show up on Sunday shows.
Oh, my God.
And you know, the most interesting part about it was my phone number was public. It was a number that I had since 2002. So my phone just started blowing up, but I did not get one phone call from anyone in Oregon.
So national. This was national attention.
Wow, I'm going to have to. So it's been removed, but you got copies of this? I want to see this.
It's out there. You can research the news.
So this is to the First Lady? Something said about the First Lady?
Yes.
Okay.
But would you like to apologize to the American people?
I'm not going to do it publicly.
No.
I want to keep it private. I've had enough press. I didn't want to get press that way. So
all right. But you would have done it differently looking back?
Absolutely.
All right. I like to say for myself, I think Melania Trump is fantastic. When I voted Trump, I thought I was voting for her. Totally. Yeah, definitely.
Well, she is pretty.
It forced me to, no dispute there. And it forced me to re-examine the way I respond to people.
It takes a lot. Roll with those punches.
It was a tough lesson learned. I wasn't looking for any kind of public press in that manner at all. I'm just looking to win a race.
And make a positive difference. So positivity.
So the thing is you're running against Greg Walden. He's been in for 20 years, and some people say that's too long. Some people say let's keep him. The big thing that you're interested in is you're interested in the timber industry or forestry. What's your main concern?
Yeah, my main concern is forestry. It's really my first, second, third concern, and that's because in the 2nd District we're not as affluent as you guys are here in Eugene, and Portland, obviously, we're well below the income levels. The statewide family income levels, we're about 20% below that. We have SNAP recipients. Our numbers are atrocious in counties like Klamath County, the county I live in, Jackson County. We're at about $25 per person. In some of our rural counties, the amount of public assistance is very high, and we can fix all that.
Is it the highest in the state?
I believe Klamath County is,
And is that because we don't have the revenue from timber industries that we used to?
Yeah, it's just a loss of opportunity. We've lost opportunity. We used to have upwards of 15 mills in the northeast section of the 2nd District, northeast Oregon, and now we have 2 and 1 that runs at half capacity. And I mean half capacity, like it's open for 3 days and closed for 3 days.
Wow. So you know, the thing is, when I first moved out here from Philadelphia, and I came out, and prior to moving, I saw that the timber industry was still robust, and then I took a year or so to get ready to move out, and I come out in '82, and it seemed like it's called the Depression of Oregon Depression. The timber industry took a hit. The mills were shutting down. Why was that? I mean, because people need wood products.
Sure, it's a commodity, and it's just been forgotten. It's been attacked by the environmentalist industry. Our laws are just so voluminous that they've gone through and searched out, and every attempt at legislation to shore up these holes in the law are exploited, and every time the Forest Service tries to do something as far as a timber sale or what's called a servant contract on federal land, which we have a lot of in Eastern Oregon, we have like 7 forests, which are poised for a huge forest fire. And of course, it's not smoky here today, but we've been socked in at my house for the last two months.
Yeah, it's been weeks here. Red sunsets.
If you don't have enough, if you're not cutting lumber at all, it makes it more of a fire risk.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about we could have some sort of revenue and harvest some of the lumber and also decrease fireworks. It could be a win-win situation
for everyone.
Jobs
for everyone. In fact, in the 70s, timber fallers used to make upwards of $300 a day. That today, $75,000 a year, $1,500 a week would be above the statewide per capita income or family income.
No, definitely.
So, I mean, we had opportunity here, we had prosperity, and now all that has just gone, and people have forgotten that forestry even existed. And the forest hasn't disappeared.
Well, they're saying it's dead. That's what people keep saying. They say this isn't going to come back, but they're
I was
not,
on a TV show in Bend,
Yeah.
they're like, well, that was in 1970. Well, hey, this is today. What's the problem? You know, the forest didn't fade away. Now it's just overstocked. And the easy solution is not even that difficult. If we could just take out dead and dying trees in the forest, we could fill every log deck in Eastern Oregon, and probably open a couple more.
Because I noticed that when I go to, say, one of the outlets, the building outlets, building materials, that the price of wood products is just so, I mean, just for a sheet of plywood, you're talking about like 30, 40, 50 bucks for a sheet of plywood. So is that because they're not harvesting what they could, and it's like more of a rare commodity? Is that why wood products are so
right
expensive?
Now, the issue with building materials in general is that we have had some natural disasters down in the south. So the demand is high nationwide, and bid packages for wood, if you go out and look for a bid package to build a spec home or even a tract home, those packages, the prices are only good for 30 days. Well, that's pretty hard to work with if it's going to take you 6 months to get a permit to build the house.
Right.
So that's part of the supply and demand issue with why we have high costs. But I'll give you something more interesting. Our wood that we're able to harvest off private and state lands is more in demand overseas, and it's going to the ports in Portland, and they're just shipping it overseas, where they're paying more money than we could get here.
So I see. So they're the companies are getting more money, say, from China.
Right.
Wow. Than what they could sell it for here.
Right.
Wow. And of course that increases the demand here and prices to us, because that makes sense. So you get into office. What's the first thing you're going to do with to negate all this or the changes? What would you have to do?
We have a problem in the legal area. Originally, I thought it was specific legislation, which Greg Walden tries to do a lot and fails at. And he's only written 14 laws in the last 20 years, most of which are binding resolutions or House resolutions. They're not really laws. He's got some laws for naming veterans hospitals.
Nice words.
Yeah.
Totally.
Which isn't even a congressman's job. That's a senator's job.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, naming veterans hospitals is a senator's job. So he's big on that. That gets him some good press. But in the meantime, everybody in Eastern Oregon pays the price.
Right.
You know, and so there's a law called the Equal Access to Justice Act, and that is basically a civil rights law that gives you the ability to sue the government if you've been discriminated against by the government, which happens every day. We all know this. Mostly inadvertently, people go some government or they work in some government facility and they get discriminated against in some way. So the government gives you this option to redress your damages through the Equal Amendment to Justice Act. And essentially, because attorneys aren't free. We all know
that.
Yeah. So, so if you have to hire an attorney to rectify a claim and you prevail, the Equal Access to Justice Amendment provides you to recover your attorney's fees. Now the environmentalist groups, which are really just groups of one, if you look at their websites, they show a lot of people with smiling faces and they look all happy and they're in their canoe out in the environment, and in the meantime they're environmental terrorists essentially. So if you look at their tax returns, you find out that there's just one guy who's getting paid. And they're fleecing their donors, and they're causing all these problems. Anytime the federal land managers try to put something out for sale, it's litigated against immediately. And Greg Walden tries to put in an act called categorical exclusion in all his legislation, which provides for redress of grievances at the end of the process instead of in the middle. And that doesn't go over well because
I'm sure that makes sense.
You still have to be able to shut these guys down from a legal aspect, and you need to shore up the holes of the loose ends in the Swiss cheese legislation, essentially. And there's plenty of precedent cases in the Ninth Circuit alone and in every circuit across America where people don't get their attorney's fees when they prevail. And so we need, and it's been ruled on by the Supreme Court even, that the enforcement action, end of the action, that you have to show a sustained and justifiable reason that you need to get your attorney's fees back, and that's not being enforced. So if we force these guys to pay their bills instead of the taxpayer paying their bills, we can stop them and we can get back into forestry. That's probably the safest and fastest way to shore up the holes.
Well, I don't know how these environmental groups are set up. You see, you got one person; they're fleecing the donors. I mean, how do you? I mean, that's a pretty hefty allegation.
It's not just an allegation. Their tax returns are public.
No, yeah.
And I have a few on my website. I'll just give you an.
But how did they get away? If it's public, how did they get away with?
That's
fleecing?
A good question.
Fleecing sounds like. When I think of fleecing, I think of like fraud. I think of
I do too.
What are some other illegal? I'm not saying what they're doing is illegal, but I think of like racketeering. Those are words that come to my mind. I'm not a lawyer.
I think that aspect needs to be looked at too. I believe they might be committing some tax crimes, and that probably needs to be turned over to law enforcement to at least be looked at.
So, do you say that these environmental groups that you're thinking of or talking about, that they're basically there to get a bunch of cheerleaders to get like a photo ops for all the people who want their smiling face in a brochure or a commercial, and then basically they say, look at all these people we have, and then just basically keep money for their own, I don't know what.
It's a business. It's a business. I'll give you an example. We have one in Ashland with 2 principals and 13 employees. One director made $3,900, and the 2 principals made like $112,000. For 2016 on their return. The other one made $130,000. We have another environmental group in the East that's always taking the government to court. That person pays himself about mid $60,000 salary, and he's got $600,000 of the corporation's net worth invested in securities. So as far as I see, it looks like a hedge fund to me.
Are these guys listed as a non-profit?
Yes. So that's why you can look at their tax returns.
Because I mean, a non-profit, I mean, I don't understand the mechanics of it, because to me, if I had a non-profit and people say, well, you're raising money for charities, you should become a non-profit, and then which just sounds daunting to me, but then it's like you hear like, well, people will give you money if they know you're a non-profit, and yet I hear about these people making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I don't know, if you're living off hundreds of thousands of dollars, it sounds pretty profitable. Yeah, and so that's beyond me. But so we're gonna go, and you're gonna have get your interest in forestry. You're gonna try to bring jobs back. You're gonna try to minimize forest fires, and I think a couple people said they're against opening the logging again because they have this idea that they don't want any of the old growth to be cut down.
That's another misnomer. The old growth woods are not used in the timber industry. We have a standard right now for federal forests that we can only cut up to a 21-inch base, 4 foot off the ground on the uphill side. The mills have innovated and accommodated from back in the day when they used to cut 40-inch logs. Now on the west side, we have a sawmill that can accommodate 40-inch fir. But on our east side, we don't have so much fir. We have a lot of ponderosa pine, and on our northern exposures, we have some what they call subalpine firs. It's essentially a Douglas fir, but some white firs. So the mills have accommodated to cut a 21-inch log, and some of these mills only want a log the size of maybe 18 inches.
Okay.
Okay. So the old growth wood is more of a specialty demand for finish work. It's not for building. It's generally kind of soft and airy, which is why it falls over.
Okay.
Eventually.
Well, so another concern, a lot of environmentalist, environmentally inclined people are worried about that if you're going to have logging again, you got their objection is not the logging itself, even if you're going to keep away from the old growth, but they're concerned about diversity. Then I hear other people say, the logging companies are farming in areas where they're allowing a certain amount of diversity, and they're only farming trees that are raised. So there's still, even though there may not be old growth in the area, they're keeping some sort of diversity. Is that a true statement?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it sounds like to me that if all this is true, it doesn't sound like it would be a bad idea to look more deeply into this for.
And Greg Walden's tried to do this repeatedly.
So he's tried. He's
absolutely
in
tried.
favor of what you're trying to do, but he hasn't been able to.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Whether he has the resources.
Unable.
Right.
Okay.
He talks about it all the time.
Capacity.
Whether he has the legal resources to do it, or it's just speech. He's been talking about it for the last 20 years. How much he cares about the environment, how much forestry is important. Well, 20 years later, how much longer do we have to wait?
Yeah. So he's all for old growth, and he's the diversity of forest, but he's also in favor of opening up for logging, but he just hasn't been able to.
And another problem we have is forest fires coming in, destroying forests in the northern sections, and then we let them rot, essentially. And sometimes they'll burn again. And then lodgepole pine, which is part of the environment, is not a very good wood for lumber. It's good for chips and maybe biomass, but it has a propensity to come back in mass after the fire. So what we need to do is go in there, cut those trees down, replant right away, and let the forest grow back.
Court Boyce was, when I interviewed him before, he said the same thing as you did.
Yeah.
And he said
he's pretty sharp when it comes to the forest. I mean, he knows the basics. I'd like to think I'm more.
Yeah. Well, you're just saying the same thing. He says people don't realize that this sets us up for forest fires that are almost uncontrollable. That he was afraid Brookings could have been taken out. These other towns could have been taken out. And billions of dollars were lost. And
not only could they be, but they will be.
Okay,
it's coming.
And that's what and now we're having problems in Northern California and all that.
I'm from Northern California. Santa Rosa fire was a wind-related issue, not a forest fire, but I knew 4 people that lost their homes. I mean, it's devastating to look at a neighborhood where you've been and just see it decimate.
One issue I want to talk about is guns. We have all these alleged problems with guns. People want to take away guns. Some people say we need more control of guns. Some people say we shouldn't have guns at all. There's no need for any American to have guns. Other people say every household should have several. What's your viewpoint on guns?
I'm a gun owner and a hunter, and my main priority here in Oregon is I don't personally feel threatened by people with guns. I don't think it's a big issue in Oregon, and we do a lot of gun business here. So I'm not going to take anybody's job from them. In Medford, we've got pawn shops with vast used gun arrays. Those people like their jobs. They get paid well. They provide for their family, and so I'm just not going to go there.
Provides defense to a community with not enough law enforcement officers.
Exactly. We have because we can't generate funds that go to the general fund. To provide for law enforcement or other general services, so we end up fleecing the taxpayer.
Or perhaps people don't want to make some sort of general fund like that. They feel more comfortable taking care of their own property defense. And
True.
There's a lot of those people out in East Oregon.
Well,
absolutely.
I heard the rumor. I mean, I've heard many times on listening to experts on. I don't know if you call them fake news or not, but I listen to a lot of people who are looking to the stats, the different talking heads throughout, whether it's Fox News, CNN, whether it's the Washington Post, whether it's the media outlets that people on the left and right both respect. I hear that, okay, the majority of gun shootings are not law-abiding citizens to be able to get to begin with, and they've gotten guns illegally regardless, and so it was, you know, criminals tend to get whatever they want anyways. But in England and some other countries, I've heard that they've done away with guns, like in Australia and some other places, so stabbings kind of increased. That's
and now they're running over people with cars and trucks and buses.
Right. Bombings or stabbings.
You can't stop somebody who's intent on hurting someone.
It's human nature. It's just like with prescriptions. In, I believe it was 2010, they did a reformulation of OxyContin to reduce the number of abuse that was going on. What they saw was that there was a direct correlation between the increase in people who died of heroin overdoses to people that stopped taking OxyContin because of the reformulation. Right. So you have the same issue there. You take one issue off the table, it's just replaced by one other.
Right.
Yeah. And
so with the increased violence, there's a lot of social engineers, sociologists who said that the increased violence isn't from a lack of guns or lack of knives or too many guns, too many knives. It has to do as an outward symptom of more underlying problems like people not being able to afford housing, people not able to afford health care, people who are out of work. There's stress. A lot of
I want to say a social issue, like people not having conflict resolution skills.
Or
you know?
that too, yeah.
Great example. Just the other day, I was, just after work, I was driving on my way to go buy some shoes. So I'm driving, and I see this guy riding what I swear is my bike on the side of the street. My bike, which was locked up right in front of my house when I left for work that morning. Okay. So, about 2 seconds go by, and I'm like, that's definitely my bike. This is Eugene. That crackhead back there is obviously riding my bike. I'm gonna see what's up with this. So I roll around the corner, pull over, hop out, and the guy's standing right in front of the store, just waiting for his buddy or whatever, and says, "Hey, do you work here?" And I'm like, "Nope." Grab the bike, and I just said, "Well, you're on my bike, man. Just by the way, I'm gonna need this back now. Got to get off." And he tries to go with this story about how it's his friend's bike that he let him borrow it, and he's real sorry, and long story short.
So it was evident that it wasn't his bike.
It was obviously my bike.
And it was actually your bike.
It was actually my bike.
It wasn't a bike that looked like.
There are distinct characteristics of my bike, like a cracked pedal.
So when you pushed it home, you went in your garage, your light, and it wasn't there, and it was in your hands.
Oh yeah, totally. I didn't just take some random guy's bike. And once again, it's like, I was armed.
Shoot him and
I was armed, but my first, not even my second or third or fourth reaction was going to be pull a gun on this guy and tell him I need my bike back.
Right.
It's,
that would have been my first reaction.
Hey, to each their own. But the point is, I got my bike back without any issue of violence. I was closer to this guy than you are here. He was, just caught in the act, and some crazy crackhead lady tried to back him up and say, "Do you have paperwork for this bike? Where's your?" A crackhead asking me for my registration. So
easy on the crack.
Back
in the day, it is what it is.
Back when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, a lot of people had guns. They had the gun training.
Yeah, training's important. I've had training
and so forth. So, but the fact is that you didn't hear about that many shootings. There wasn't.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's not.
It's a cultural issue.
It's not just a gun. There's something else causing people to shoot.
Yeah, totally.
I'm actually interested in healthcare, and I'm wondering. I hear so many things about. We need affordable health care. Some people don't have health care. Other people have the Oregon health care. Then there was the Obama plan. Then I hear Mark Herbert talking about his plan B or an answer to plan B, and I'm confused. So, what would you like to see? What would you like to see as far as health care? How would you address the health care needs?
Well, I think, number one, we need to know that 50% of the population here in Oregon is on Medicare and Medicaid or a form of Medicaid via the Oregon Health Plan. So, via 50% of the population.
Now, one is for the people who are, a certain age and older?
65 and over.
And that's Medicare?
Medicare.
Okay, Medicaid's for people
Medicaid is, no, it's for people.
Income related.
Income related.
Oh, it's income related, okay.
I believe it's also disability related to an extent.
It's supplemented via the government to the states. In our case, it's called the Oregon Health Plan.
Okay.
Yeah, each state does their own different little thing.
But there are seniors that are underfunded, so to say, that only have Social Security and have health problems. They get a combination of Medicaid and Medicare to pay their bills. Medicare doesn't cover long period stays in nursing.
And usually, I want to say they deserve it. Senior citizens.
Absolutely.
But
it's a problem
Why is it a problem?
because there's no money.
Yep.
Well, that's a problem.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, no money's a problem.
And the system's ineffective. A lot of the times the medical system we currently have, it's just a lot of red tape. Doctors can't do what they want to do. They're cut back by these CDC guidelines, and not because the CDC and the FDA, each have different guidelines for how doctors can do their job, and only one of them is the legal guideline. That's the FDA. The CDC, they just kind of make stuff up and
so you're
bend
talking
people's
about
arms.
opiate prescription.
Well, all prescriptions, but opiate is the major one right now. This is a major issue. Centers for Disease Control.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I wouldn't realize that they had anything to say, but I thought they had to do with preventing anthrax and stuff.
They regularly make guidelines, which are not legally binding, but they push these to the doctors, and they use it as leverage to threaten doctors' licenses.
But a lot of times guidelines are good because doctors need. One man is just one man. That's why one doctors have lots of books in their office. And if your doctor doesn't refer to a book, then you should probably change your doctor.
So now with the healthcare issue,
well, obviously
we need more money, and then
we need some opportunity to get wages to increase organically. That would get people off of the Oregon Health Plan Medicaid rolls.
It's the wages if they got jobs, and
then their employer would have to. Take advantage of government incentives to pay for their insurance. They would be able to pay for their insurance. I pay for my insurance, enormous deductible. And every time I step into a doctor's office, I end up in an operating room. So,
but for these people on like Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of the times in our state, it's a revolving door issue where they don't have health care. They get the government plan. They find out nobody takes it, and then they're right back outside the door looking for health care.
That's not even a big problem in Oregon, but in California, it is enormous. I mean, no doctor will take Medicaid. They're just the prices are so low. Unless you're dying and you're hospitalized, that's our only avenue of recourse.
Then if you get somebody who doesn't have anything, or they're not given emergency that much, then that goes to the taxpayers.
Or they end up in an emergency room and get stabilized and kicked out.
Right.
So,
I mean,
which costs us money later because they'll end up going back.
Right.
So,
so how are you going to fix it? What's your
well, I'm not a big healthcare person. I don't have the solution.
I got an idea for that.
Let me give you my solution, and we'll hear yours, and then we'll compare. So, my mom was a nurse for 30 years, so I grew up around medicine and had a lot of doctors in the family. And I've been in the system before myself. I was injured on the job, so I was in the workers' comp system for a few years. So what we really need to do, because it's so cost-driven, we have to somehow lower costs. If we don't lower costs, we're not going anywhere.
Right.
And it's just going to snowball. And the costs are driven by the insurer, so there's a lot of positions that we could probably regulate, like medical review officers, case managers, utilization review. Nobody's ever heard of this stuff until you get involved with it. And these people are the ones that drive the cost, because an insurer will spend $100 to keep you from getting $10 worth of coverage. They will absolutely go out of their way to not spend money on you.
And that costs $100?
That costs the taxpayer.
Yeah, so the $100 that they're spending to keep you from getting $10, is that...
As an example.
And that's because they're paying all these other salaries of people who may not...
It's just their policy. It's just their policy to keep their money in their bank, whether it goes to attorneys or third-party medical opinions in the case of medical review officers or utilization review. They would rather spend that money on them than getting you treated. So we need to kind of rearrange we need to get back to medicine the way it was, where the doctor was in control. Now you go to a doctor and there's 2 or 3 people trying to get money from your coverage out of your insurer that didn't exist 30 years ago because everything is so difficult.
I would like to see not necessarily programs in tax-based programs, but I'd like to see an attitude where people started taking somehow as a society, because back in my day, health and fitness was a big thing. You had gym class, you had a lot of intramural sports during gym class. You had the President Kennedy's presidential fitness thing.
Right.
And
right.
So
I was part of that.
Yeah. And so that was great, and people took more responsibility for for good health. Nowadays, 66% of health problems, especially before the age of 60, is due to lifestyle. Whether smoking cigarettes,
I don't doubt that at all.
Huh?
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all.
So it'd be nice if somehow, as some sort of a social contagion, a meme that we got people say, quit smoking, quit investing in poor health, and spend less money on your bad habits.
Well, like,
so you wouldn't have to like go
50% of America is overbeat. Overweight or obese or whatever. I don't know what the actual number is, but it's enormous, and that's costing the taxpayer ultimately.
Diabetes has gone up like
really?
Tenfold in the past just 8 years.
And look at some of the psychiatric problems we're having with kids, and that are just consistent and not going away.
There's a lot we could do as a society, influence each other to keep the health costs by just saying, let's not do this, let's do this. So one thing I want to ask you is about like immigration.
All right.
So what do you think about immigration?
I wish I knew the answer. That's been tried so many times. We can't. We had an amnesty program under Reagan. We've invested in Mexico. They're corrupt. So anytime we try to invest in a corrupt nation to secure the border, obviously the money's not going to go where we want. So I don't know. You want to build a wall to the moon? Go for it. I guarantee you somebody's going to find a way around it.
I heard a rumor the other day. I don't know if it was Joe Rogan's show or some other thing I heard where that Mexico economy was getting better. Yeah, it was Joe Rogan's show. He said his parents moved to Mexico because now a lot of people, immigrants, are moving to Mexico.
Well, I know under President Obama, he was cracking down much harder than Trump. Now the arrests are more random, but they're still lower than President Obama's numbers. But in general, if you look at the stats, illegal immigration from Mexico is down. Because people don't want to come here. They see the realization once they get here, and they're like, hey, I'm going home. It's no
bad neighborhood.
It's no fun. Nobody wants to live in a criminally...
Their health system's actually better. You can,
it's affordable.
Yeah, afford, back care, whatever.
Here's something that, so we're talking about health care in rural Oregon.
Yep.
And the Democrat is making a big deal that no one is just okay.
Our Democrat is running around Eastern Oregon, preaching to the choir, telling everybody she's going to win this thing, and the numbers just won't allow it. We're just too heavily Republican and conservative in nature, and we also have a huge contingent of unaffiliated voters who she thinks are going to vote for her.
Now, who is she? What's this?
Her name is Miss Jamie McLeod.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And she did.
Is she your competitor, or is she?
She's also. There's 3 people on the ballot, of which I'm one of them. But the incumbent is Greg Walden. She's a Democratic contender.
Oh, okay.
So, one of the things I've caught her in is she's running around talking about healthcare in rural Oregon, and she said people who get hurt in Oregon have to drive 3 hours to a hospital. Well, it took me 30 seconds to figure out that we have hospitals in 17 of our 20 counties. So, and she defines healthcare as proximity. So proximity is not an issue. We only have 2 level 1 trauma centers in the state, and they're both in Portland. So if you get traumatically injured,
you're going to be at helicopter.
Your proximity. The only importance in proximity is if you're close to Portland. If you're in the southern part of the state, you're better off going to San Francisco General.
So, on your website it says you're an independent conservative. Could you tell me and the audience more of what that means?
For me, I was a Republican all my life, and it was just an avenue to be successful in the election because I knew I couldn't run as a Republican. I don't believe so much in. I don't believe that President Trump is really conservative, and I think his history of being registered as a Democrat and supporting Democrats has proved that, as well as the last omnibus spending bill. I mean, he might as well have signed it with President Obama's signature. Our new defense budget, everybody's excited about, is only going to get us 20 to 30 billion more dollars. And believe it or not, that's going to go towards a new low-yield nuclear weapon, which we lost in 2014, called what we call the TLAM-N, or the nuclear tomahawk, which had problems crashing into mountains and stuff on its way to the target. So we didn't want it doing that with a nuclear weapon on board. So now we're going to get a new low-yield nuclear weapon, which is absolutely insane because obviously we have plenty of nuclear weapons. In fact, on our ballistic submarines, they want to remove a lot of those nuclear warheads and make them more kinetic. Yeah. So we can use those missiles because they're just sitting there. And
yeah, I'm a huge fan of missiles in general because one of my grandfathers helped design the Sidewinder missile for Raytheon, so that's
nice.
Yeah, I was, good memories there. They're not nuclear. But
I was an anti-aircraft Hawk missile operator. That's my own experience with
Thank you for your service.
Good times. Yeah,
it was shooting the missiles were fun.
Yep.
I didn't serve any time in combat, so I didn't really. Anyways, I said so you're a nuclear and an expert, educational background, nuclear and scientific theory, weapons, and.
That's how I prepared for this. I got interested in nuclear theory just by reading books, and I originally watched a subcommittee hearing in the Senate featuring Al Franken. It was a nuclear. They believed he had the chairman of the NRC on there, and they were asking him the most inane and basic questions, and I was like, man, I could do better than that. Yeah. Because, I mean, I can talk to a physicist.
Right.
And I can't wrap my head around the mathematics, but I know the theory. Right. And so that's how I've prepared myself, by reading a lot of scientific books, because that's an aspect that is easily understood if you put in the time, but it's often ignored. And so when you get these people and you start talking about specifics, then their eyes just roll and they want to walk away. But that's a big part of government. Yeah. I mean, Department of Defense is 17-18% of our national budget. Yeah. And political policy or foreign policy. I specialize. My interest is in North Korea primarily, but by proxy, North Korean missiles are very similar to Iranian missiles because they have combined efforts. So they're operating with former and improved versions of the Soviet missiles, primarily the Scud, A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3, and then they've developed their own. So that's stuff you need to know. Yeah. If you're voting on it, you need to be able to. I can hire attorneys. I have attorneys. I'm not an attorney, but I can read through a law and go, hey, does this sound right to you? And and say, hey, what does this mean? When I read it, and then I can have an attorney explain it to me. We don't need more attorneys in Congress. We need more people that understand esoteric information.
You have skills in overseeing people and so forth, being an executive of a trucking company.
Right.
So I mean, how long have you been doing that?
Forever I've had a commercial license, and then I ran a big company that was around $20 million when we took it over, and we scaled it. We were coming off a big job. We came down to about 15 and raised our margins. Before that, they were running around 16. We came down, and then we ultimately sold it. And then I was affiliated with other smaller guys after that, primarily gentlemen from India, and so that's my background, is transportation. Not a big favorite of mine anymore. No. Nor was it ever.
Yeah. Happens.
And, but we have some serious transportation issues as well in this state that we can't do anything about.
Like what?
We have a very high, there's only 4 states in the country that have a highway use fee. So for every out-of-state carrier that comes into Oregon, they have to spend, it was 16.8 cents per mile prior to January 1st. Then it went up to 20 point something. So, and then on top of that, we have a strange arrangement with what's called the IFTA, or the International Fuel Tax Agreement. So to pay fuel taxes, besides running 20 cents a mile if you're a common carrier, you have to pay fuel taxes in every state. So, and that's primarily done with what's IFTA, the International Fuel Tax Agreement, and you just go in there and you punch in the amount of gallons you purchased, and then you pay your tax for that state. In Oregon, we charge people by the mile for fuel tax, so there's no incentive for someone to buy a new, more economical truck, because if you go from one side of Oregon to the other, so you use 100 gallons in a new truck versus an old truck that uses 125, you still pay the same amount of fuel tax. And it's almost double if you compare it to the other states when it's all commingled that pay by the gallon. So people want to think they want to do the old congressional joke, how does a road get built? Because a congressman wants it to. So you can build all the roads you want in Oregon. Common carriers nationwide are doing everything they can to stay out of Oregon or drive around it.
Wow.
And that's a state, those are state issues. We can't do anything about that at the federal level.
Wow.
So we need to have incentive. We need to have business here and make them be willing to come in here and pay the price. Because we can't, we can't
but
stop
it's an
it.
independent. I mean, you know, a lot of people worry, like, you know, let's just keep Republicans and Democrats in the picture. Why do we need a third party? Why do we need anybody else? Aren't you just taking the vote away from the voters who want either the Republican or Democrat? What's your viewpoint on that?
My current viewpoint is that's my job.
Yeah.
To take their votes. I already got my participation trophy.
Right.
It came from the Secretary of State. It's beautifully embossed by Dennis Richards. It says I won the nomination.
Oh, Dennis Richards gave it. Oh,
yeah, with his signature. It's beautiful. I'm going to post it on a piece of cardboard and frame it. Eventually it will be.
No, you know, I mean, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, a lot of people, what they say about Dennis is that he doesn't take big money interest to help his situation. He's all grassroots stuff.
Really?
Which a lot of people like.
He's a nice guy. Yeah.
I don't know anything about him.
He's a professional grandpa.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Because a lot of people get suspicious, you know, because there's some Democrats, some Republicans that get like the big corporation, and then they think, okay, those big corporations own you. But from what I understand, I haven't checked into it. This is just rumor. I heard that Dennis Miller has gone out of his way to, Dennis Richardson has gone out of his way to avoid that. And
conflict.
Got small mom and pop businesses and grassroots stuff. So that's pretty cool. He's got enough people to give him the money.
Positivity.
Yeah. So you know, another thing I found out, and tell me if this is true or not, because last time Stefan was here, I learned a lot of things, and I'm still learning. I found out that people always say that it's like with the third party. That, well, you know, so and so would have won, and what is, you know, and they're ticked off, you know, and what it turned out. Well, you voted for, say, Gary Johnson, right? And then someone, if all the people voted for Gary Johnson, the right person would, And the fact is that they found out that half the people that voted for, say, Gary Johnson, would have voted for the Republican person, and the other half would have voted for. So no real votes were taken away.
Doesn't surprise me. It's the candidate's job to go out there and put something out there, and show the constituency that they can connect with them and get the vote and win.
So, you know, in a third party, do you guys believe that if we had a really robust, virile third party, that would help keep things a little cleaner, more honest? What's your view on that? That's the theory.
I don't know what the ultimate, we would have to have a lot of them. Right now, there's obviously only two independents in Congress. They're both senators, Bernie Sanders and Angus King, which nobody knows him. And
he's Ross Perot. Wasn't he an independent?
Yeah, but he didn't win.
No. I mean, he caused a lot of people to change the way they act,
right? Right. He got a lot of votes.
As a Republican, I do like this emerging third-party system. I mean, it's...
you're not intimidated by this third party whatsoever.
I think it's a good thing towards making things more applicable to both mainstream America and helping politics move forward in a more productive way. Because, I mean...
It can't hurt.
Yeah. I mean, I consider myself a moderate Republican. Some people call me either way. They'll say, oh, that guy's not a Republican, or he's more of a Republican than Donald Trump. So I don't know what to think of that. But, you know, with the left, we have an increasingly polarized movement to the far left, and some aspects of the right, I believe, a similar measure. So as moderation being the definition of the third-party system, with more moderates, you know, casting themselves in that pool, that creates the possibility for more of a coalition issue government, not just, oh, we want to eliminate any logging of trees and that's our position, and communism, socialism, whatever from the left, versus like, oh, let's eliminate any and all corporate restrictions and, you know, have no minimum wage so far, you know.
Well, you know, Jesse
things
Ventura,
like that.
when he was governor of the Minnesota,
yeah.
He's against the two. I mean, he believes in three parties. He's like, say, the way it's set up now, you have two parties. It's more like pro wrestling. Everybody, there's a lot of things going on. He figures a third party, and I believe he was an independent as well.
Yeah, could be.
Okay, so he basically says that three parties is what you need, three strong parties, and that would keep. There'd be a lot less unsavory horse trading in the back smoky rooms. In his mind, and it makes sense to me that in an economy, say a robust economy, you got the market and people don't like that. The rank and file, that people hate to hear. Well, the market chooses, the market speaks, but the people are the market. And so I would like to see more people, especially in a primary, instead of being forced to vote Republican or Democrat. I'd like to see people have more options, 3 parties, and be able to vote for who they want, regardless of force. And so that would, again, be the market speaking. That would be the people. So then again, it would be the best people winning. Sure. It'd be the best man wins, right?
Well, it's the voice of the people getting to be heard.
Right.
And so if instead of the Democrats having to agree with the Republicans on an issue, instead of the Republicans having to agree with the Democrats on an issue,
right,
it would be either the Republicans can agree with the third party and thus have a majority to produce a movement that is productive, versus the left, maybe getting one of their more reasonable ideas out there. So it eliminates this issue of having 2 parties that absolutely, essentially refuse to connect on any issues.
Right.
This way, the issues that really should rise to the top for the average American can get some more traction.
It would help to keep people more involved, to be the partisans, because what we're trying to do is, like, one thing I noticed, it seems like a new breed, maybe because I'm unsophisticated in this, I see people who are Republicans, and I'm nonpartisan, right? I see people who are Republicans that go, man, you make me want to be Republican. I see this other person, Democrat, you make me want to be a Democrat. And then when you talk to them, they're the type of people who say, we need to get out of this identity politics. We need to get out of this partisan stuff. We need to be able to reach across the aisle to each other and work with each other. And so a lot of these guys are telling me, we would like to see a third party. And so you think that having a robust third party would help to eliminate a lot of the dysfunction that partisan politics sometimes.
Yeah, a reasonable majority. Because if I was in office this time next year, I would prefer that there be a reasonable third party group that I could connect with and work with, versus the far left growth of the Democratic Party, which absolutely, as a conviction, refuses to support anything Republican related, even if it's like. Head pats for babies. They'd be like, nah, it's a Republican agenda, not this year. What
I like seeing recently, like I try to work in the community, and especially you guys, talking to you guys influenced me. To get out with the nonprofit organizations, the people who are just simply helping, the social activists or the advocates for the community. These are people who are not running for office, who are not politicians, but they are now looking forward to having a marriage or working, and they see a working of the current candidates and the politicians working with the social advocates and so forth. So I like seeing that, and now that we're kind of coming to a close, because I want to ask Mark questions last, because he's a future guest. But what I wanted to ask you first, before we close up and I talk to Mark, is, what is the future? Because you ran against Peter DeFazio in the primary, right? And
actually, I ran against Art Robinson for the Republican nomination.
For the Republican nomination.
DeFazio was the final contender.
Right, he was the carrot at the end of the race. But now, what are your plans?
Oh, well, I've got a decent amount of public support. I mean, we're pushing through with the congressional campaign through November, and there's actually some decent people that are saying, hey, no matter what, I will support you in this endeavor. I really believe in what you're saying, and these are people that have a wide variety of lifestyles. I was reasonably surprised by, some of my voters. They're out there fighting forest fires right now. Some of them, they're out volunteering with animals. Some of them, they're, just kind of senior citizens that want to hang out in their house and just be able to live their lives and see something positive on TV. So pushing forward with that. There's some less partisan offices coming up for 2019, so get something on board for that. And then 2020, there's a few options opening up, and just really building a team, so that's what this is all about. It's good networking.
You're looking at the long haul, the long picture.
Definitely. And my last question for Mark was, if you do win this election,
hire you?
Well, that's a question for later, I guess, but, my question is, as a third-party candidate in Congress, would you be both, happy and willing to work with both aisles of the party based on who really shares your beliefs and the beliefs of your voters.
In fact, I mean, the first person I would want to meet is, I would want to meet the whole contingent of the Oregon delegation to Congress, but I would want to meet Senator Merkley because I have affiliation with weaponry, and he was a DOD analyst, so which he keeps kind of secret. And so I think we would have some good conversations. But most of the guys that I really love listening to on C-SPAN and just watching the congressional guys that are out there in open orders are Democrats. I love Elijah Cummings. These guys that get up and move people. You know, this guy Al Green from Texas. I could watch this guy all day. He's never written a law. He's been in there since '96, but he serves as a conscience. You know, he's a social conscience, and he's a trial attorney, and he puts on a good show. I could watch him all day. I'd be the first. Again is, Al Green, not the singer Texas. Al Green.
Okay, Al Green's Texas.
Yeah, he's an old guy, but he's cool.
Okay. So before I address Mark again, do you have a website or anything to plug you?
Website. So that's www.votestrek.com. VOTESTREK. We got links to the YouTube and the Twitter on there, up to about 11,000 Twitter followers.
So. Oh, nice.
Really?
Yeah,
11,000, all right.
Yeah, 11,000.
He's on his way to...
I can't even get my own friends to follow me.
Hey, yes.
He's on his way to being legitimately verified.
Yeah.
Unlike me, who just got it by default.
Hey, one step at a time. It's fun. We're staying active.
So, Mark, in closing, what do you think is important to close out with and to tell everybody?
Well, obviously, I think that Greg Walden's record speaks for itself, and the voters need to look at that, and they need to look at all three candidates' websites and see who you feel will do something for you, because the voter, the constituent in Eastern Oregon has been disregarded. Our current congressman's a proxy vote. He's a political man, and our district is the 7th biggest in the nation. It's too needy. It's too big, and we don't need a part-time representative. So I would hope the people, the voters hire and fire who they...
hire and fire.
And so it's
Sometimes
up to them.
They don't fire when they should and don't hire when they should.
Right.
And you're asking them to do what they should.
Right.
That's your opinion, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, what is your website?
ShakeAMillionHands.com.
ShakeAMillionHands.com. All right. Well, awesome talking
Thank
to you
you so much.
And I hope both you guys, since you're for nonpartisan and I'm representing, trying to raise money for Women's Space and a lot of other charities, as Mark knows. I was going to meet him down south, and he was going to walk with me. He would have. I just my truck messed up.
We will catch up with you.
Good.
And lunch is on me.
Okay.
Hey.
Or dinner.
I would just be happy if you walked with me and bought a shirt or gave money to.
I'll do both. I'll do both.
I think you guys would look like super vibrant and attractive in a Vinsanity shirt. I think it'd be great.
Oh.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that.
Grab it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, you guys.
Thank you.